Welcome to Hebron, city of the Avot. I'm Avraham Shira, and this weekend there was a big event here. Thousands of people came to celebrate Avraham Avinu and Sarah, Imenu, and of course the whole ancient tradition of the Jewish people's presence here in the city of Hebron. Certainly, this place is no stranger to controversy. This place is a historical precedent in the ancient world as it is today. So we're going to talk about some very interesting ideas that are going to connect the past and the present in a very interesting and profound way. Now, you can see behind me the great hall that was built, I believe, by Suleiman. And of course, it is a shrine for Muslims as well as Jews, and it is a holy place that we are privileged to pray here, to come here any chance we get. Now, in this week's Parsha, we have the whole incident of Abraham coming to Hebron and buying this field from Ephron, a Hittite. In Hebrew, of course, Hittite is a Hittite. Now, we need to know a few things about this relationship, and we'll get a very nice broad picture of what was going on in a historical context. The Hittites were an ancient tribe that spread throughout the Mediterranean basin before the advent of Avraham Avinu and during his arrival in the land of Canaan. Now, Canaan, this land that we're in now, was originally given to Ham, the son of Noah, after the flood. The three major continents were split up between the three major sons of Noah. Africa was given to Ham, the Asian continent was given to Canaan, and the Middle East, and then the European continent was given to Japhet. So, of course, three men, that's a lot of territory for three men to control, you know, even if you can fly around in a spaceship. But what happened was, at a certain point, Shem, who was Melchizedek, who was the king of Jerusalem, who knew and honored Abraham, as we saw in last week's Parsha, he called him Melech the El Elyon, the king of the gods, the prince of God, if you will. And the priest, actually, was the correct language. And so Melchizedek, Shem, the son of Noah, gave orders to his descendants to take the land of Canaan from the descendants of Ham, his brother. Okay, why is that important? Well, what's important is the Hittite tribe is not from the sons of Ham. The Hittite tribe is from the sons of Shem, the Semites, as they're called in English, who were the ones who were deeded, if you will, the Middle East. And so they had their eye on this land for a long time. And the Hittites, because they were so powerful in the peak of that empire, took pieces of Canaan, and this was one of them. Now, we ask a certain question. We see clearly from the Parsha that Ephron, the Hittite, did not know that the cave in his field was the burial place of the first human being that was blessed with divine speech. The first human being that is recorded as having an intimate relationship with God. Were there other human beings or humanoids before Adam? Well, in the Kabbalah, the answer is yes. By many religious authorities, they would say no. But we don't need to get into that argument. Whether or not they were human beings before Adam or not, it's not important to us right now. The Torah tells us that Adam was blessed with a divine speaking soul. So a speaking soul means you have the power to create with speech. And Adam was the first man who had the power to create with his speech. And so when Adam began his service of God, he was the first one to understand and to develop that one-on-one relationship with the creator of the universe. Now, along comes Ephron and the Hittites. And who were the Hittites? They were a snake-worshipping cult. They worshipped snakes. They worshipped the power of the snake. They worshipped the forces and the effects that snakes had on people, which of course is a fear-based religion and cult. And this was spread all over the Mediterranean, from Egypt all the way up to Turkey and to Greece. And most of the coastal plain and a lot of the inner lands, especially in Turkey. So it's a very interesting thing that Abraham chose to be buried in a place where the people were snake worshippers. Why would Abraham want to do that? Why does a holy man want to be buried in an unholy place? Well, because Abraham knew that this was not an unholy place, this was an extremely holy place. It was so holy that the external forces wanted it, just like the whole world wants Jerusalem, because it's so holy. See, anytime there's holiness, there's an attraction of the other side. It's a principle in Kabbalah that the darkness is always going for the light. So there was great light here, but it was buried in a cave and hidden. And Ephron sold it to Avraham. And we see from the Parsha that actually Ephron didn't want to sell him the cave because it wasn't worth much. So he wanted to sell him the field, the Sadeh, the field that was beside the cave, and then he could jack the price to 400 pieces of pure silver. So he was a businessman, you know. You ask for a kilo of apples, they always give you 2 kilos. And this is the way it always works. And so Avraham was fine, we'll buy the field because I want the cave, because I know what's in the cave. So the question is, how did Avraham know what was in that cave? Because it's a double cave. You go inside, down into the ground, and then you have to go deeper into the lower, the second cave, and that's where Adam was buried with Chava. So this is a holy place. This is a place where Adam was an extremely holy person. And we talk about his sin and his fall, but regardless, he did tshuva and he was an extremely holy, powerful person who had a one-on-one relationship with God. And so Avraham knew that, and he wanted to be buried to that place and that person, that spiritual antecedent, the sources, the roots of monotheism. And here he is getting buried in the midst of people who worship snakes, and who else? What else do they worship? Well, in the ancient world, in the animistic religions of Africa, Northern Africa, etc., they worship all kinds of beings. There's a god of the river, a god of the forest, a god of the lightning, a god of the ocean, a god of fertility, a god of the field. There's gods for everything. And you know, I have in my room a poster with the famous Shviti Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, with the Lam Natzech, Mizmor LeDavid, and all these divine names are written on the poster. And if you look at the divine names, you'll see lists of angels. All different kinds of angels are listed there on this poster. And it's in the books of Kabbalah. And I noticed some of the names were like Atlas, Dionysius, Zeus, the Samael, all these different names that we relate to as angels. The Greeks turned them into gods. Why would they do that? Well, the Greeks had a long-standing relationship with the sages of Israel. We know that from the Talmud, and we know that from the relationship of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi with Antoninus, and we also had the case of the stories of Rabbi Bar Chana, who would go to Athens to speak with the sages, including Socrates and Aristotle. So there was a transfer of information going on between the sages of the Jewish people and the other major nations around the Mediterranean basin. Now that took place over many hundreds of years. And you see, what happened is they received some traditions from our Kabbalah about the names of God and different names of different lower beings called angels, which are not free beings. They're created entities that God uses to do His will. Now, these beings, when they appear, it's pretty mind-blowing. They appear as like fire in a tree. They can appear on mountaintops, they can appear on the water, and they can appear in a lot of different ways, and it's a pretty astounding experience. We have this case with the wife or the father of Samson, who is Manoach, right? His wife first saw an angel the angel told her that Samson was going to be born. He was going to be a Nazarite, a person who didn't drink wine, who didn't cut his hair, and he would have tremendous power, and he would be a salvation for Am Yisrael. And Manoach, the rabbi said, was an Am Haaretz. He was not an educated person. But later the angel appeared to him, and Manoach said, "Well, what's your name?" And the angel said, "Why do you ask?" And Rav Chaim Falaji answers that question. Why did the angel ask Manoach, "Why do you want to know my name?" I don't want to tell you my name. And Rav Chaim Falaji says, because Manoach would take the angel, and because he's uneducated, he would turn it into a god. He would not understand the relationship between the creator and the creation. He would not understand that there are not independent powers, that things are given power by God, and then we have the influence over them depending on our deeds. And so Manoach's mind, the ancient mindset, had a difficulty with the idea of one power. However, conceptually, they had the idea, the ancient Africans had the idea of one God, and as do the other ancient religions in the Far East and the Middle East. But they don't focus on that aspect of their spirituality. They focus on all the little gods of the forest and gods of the river and gods of fertility, etc., etc. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. The Rambam talks about it in the Yad HaZakah, and it's something that it requires a lot of study, but I'm just trying to break it down to some very simple concepts so we get a picture why Abraham came to this city, a city of snake worshipers. Because of that cave. But because of that cave, why did the holy man have to be buried in an unholy place? Because that is the symbol of Abraham's war with evil. And this is the same war we're fighting today, my friends. The war for the human mind and the human heart. The war for allegiance. The war for allegiance is a war for who controls who. And the Jewish people have been asserting for 3,300 years that we only serve one God. Now, what's so bad about that? Because all the other forces, they want to call themselves God. And you know what? When you have more than one God, that means you can be a God, and I can be a God, and everybody can be a God. And then you start to command authority, and then allegiance over people whose minds are not developed. And then you can start charging them entrance to your temple. And you can demand favors, like their first crops, their first oil, their first wine, their first grain, their first children. Do you understand how dangerous it is to have more than one God? So Abraham came with Sarah, and they understood that this was the place from which monotheism would spread into the world, and this was the place where we would return to over and over throughout the exiles, to re-strengthen ourselves on this mission. And this is the ultimate mission. And wherever you are in the world, and whatever you do, and whatever you worship, if you forget that there's one God, you are serving a fallen force, a fallen power. And in ancient terminology, that's called idol worship. But when a person turns himself into an idol, well, that's the ultimate sin in God's eyes. Rabbi Nachman says that's like a king who sends a messenger off into a distant land, and he's dressed up all in finery, and he has a retinue with him of horses and carriages, and he looks pretty good. And he shows up in a village where nobody knows him or the king or the minister or anybody. And they ask him, "Who are you? Are you the king?" And he says, "Well, he has a moment of doubt. He has a moment of test. Am I a representative of the king, or am I the king?" And that is the same thing that we're dealing with here. Abraham said, "Do not make yourself into the king. Make yourself into a servant of the king. And you will have a good life, and you will be a holy person, and you will leave behind you children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that will continue the tradition of that choice, not to serve the fallen forces, wherever they are and however they appear." And when you come to this holy place and you set foot here, you will know why Abraham's buried here, because the holiness has to take a foothold in the midst of the unholy to transform it. Just like one candle can illuminate a great dark room, a great dark cave, which is the world, the innocent, ignorant mind of people who don't know the truth of Judaism, the truth of the Kabbalah, the truth of the Hasidut, and all the great masters that came before us to teach us, to help us, to give us a chance to get out of that cave, out of that darkness with a little bit of light. So I hope this has been interesting. There's a lot more we can say about it, a lot more that we can extrapolate and expand these ideas. But just that we understand this one thing. The war, my friends, is just between monotheism and polytheism. And polytheism is a long list down that road and highway of history. God bless you all. And I will be here again, Bezrat Hashem, here in Hebron, and at Nar Shalom in Jerusalem, and all the holy places of Israel, trying to share some of this great tradition that we've been given. Because when you receive something good, your heart just swells to give it over to those who want to receive the truth, as it's been given to us. God bless you all. Have a great week. We'll see you on Patreon, our daily class in Rabbi Nachman, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Insight Timer, on Web Yeshiva, on Lighthouse Torah Project throughout the week. So it's great to be here, and it's great to have you there. And come to Israel when you can and experience why this land is called the Holy Land.